Now we have got to take you back to a city in pain, Charlottesville, grappling with questions of security and free speech after this weekend's protests turned into deadly violence. Joining me now, former prosecutor and civil rights attorney Seema Iyer, Reverend Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network and host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, and host of NewsOne Now, Roland Martin. Reverend Al, I want to start with you. Between 2001 and now, we have seen 3 times more deaths caused by right-wing extremists than Islamic terrorists. Knowing that, and knowing that this event was taking place, a white nationalist event on Friday night, did the Charlottesville police, did authorities show up prepared for what could unfold?
Well, I think that is one of the things that we've got to look at and look at very deeply. I think there were some preparations. I think there were some attempts to move the site where they were going to be allowed to have their demonstration, and then a judge ruled that they could stay there. I think also the question becomes, how do you prepare for a terrorist to drive a car in a street that no one would think that someone would do that? So I think at one level we can question their preparation for the crowd, but the deadly act was something that I don't know they could have prepared for, and it shows the climate of hate in this country. You know, one of the things that comes out of your question, though, is since we've seen more deaths and more injuries from them, more than we've seen terrorists from other sources in this country, why is the President of the United States condemning these kinds of white supremacist terrorists, since he clearly challenged that with President Obama about naming others? So given the data you named, it's even more egregious. He will not call that out by name.
Says that I want to give you some insight on that. This morning on TV1, the Tom Joyner Morning Show, I talked with Governor Terry McAuliffe and asked him that very question. He said, one, his state troopers were outgunned. He said they had better. He said those militia members had better body armor than his officers did. He actually said that, thank God, no shots were fired, or it would have been a massacre. That's a fundamental problem when you hear a governor saying that. He said they were aware they were coming. They were tipped off by it. They knew what was actually happening.
Then why were they outgunned?
Precisely.
They didn't need to be outgunned.
Because when I think back to Ferguson, when I think back to other places, to Baltimore, when I saw police officers in riot gear with military-type equipment, with their own weaponry, I'm just trying to understand, why have I seen that type of weaponry at Black Lives Matter protests and not anticipating what these individuals were going to have in Charlottesville? That's a problem. And here's the deal. Other cities are going to have similar, these White Lives Matter marches. They better be prepared. These guys are not going to go away. They will show up again with those guns and that body armor.
Seema, Reverend Al talked about that deadly car attack.
Right.
Some are already calling this an act of domestic terrorism. It's a second-degree murder charge. From your estimation, and you haven't gotten firsthand to look at this, is second degree the right thing? When many people saw this, they said, this is vehicular homicide.
Great question, Stephanie, and actually the Rev and I were discussing this. So Virginia has 3 types of murder. They have capital murder, first-degree murder, and second-degree murder. Capital murder would require some planning done on purpose with evil intent, so it seems that this could fit. Also, this certainly could fit into a first-degree murder charge, and this case will be presented to a Virginia grand jury. It is possible it could be elevated from second degree to first degree. And also, just so everyone understands, there's this separate and concurrent investigation being done by the feds, and they will look at domestic terrorism, as well as whether this is a federal hate crime, all of which seems to apply.
Then let's talk on free speech and hate speech. This was an event where they had their permits. People knew they were coming. We're advocates in this country for free speech. But when we get to this place where we are, where this is clearly hate speech, Reverend Al, to you, where's the line?
I think the line is that people have the right to free speech, but they don't have the right to harm people, call for the harm of people, and they don't have the right to do it unanswered. And the other part of that is that you have the freedom of speech to respond to them. And I think that's what the counter-protesters were doing, some of which have been parts of civil rights organizations that many of us lead. So free speech goes both ways. But again, I keep stepping on, and I'm going to stay on, where is the president on all of this? Where are the leaders of the country that would denounce it when they've been identified with it? Let's not forget that a lot of these that were there on the side of the white supremacists that attended their march were wearing Trump hats and Make America Great Again hats. He needs to unequivocally say, do not wear my stuff, do not act like I'm with it. Or we must assume, since we're now almost, 50 hours after the fact, that he has no problem being identified with it because he will not call them out by name.
Stephanie, here's the fundamental issue. I have a piece in the Daily News in New York about this today. We expect the president to be a moral leader when tragedies happen. We expect the president to bring a nation together. Reagan did it after Challenger. Bush did it after 9/11.
You knew you
Obama
were getting something
did it.
Different now.
No, well, first of all, that's why I use the hashtag we tried to tell you. We knew exactly what we were getting. Black women, 94% voted against Donald Trump. They knew exactly what we were getting. But the issue here is, to Reverend Sharpton's point, when will other leaders step up? Where's the RNC?
That's right.
I've called out black Republicans. When will they stand up as a collective and say, you cannot be our president representing our party and say nothing? He said barely anything yesterday. He's only tweeted about the Merck CEO and the race in Alabama today. He has no intentions on speaking on this. Any other real president will be planning to go down to the University of Virginia to give a major speech on race. He will never do it because he doesn't have the guts to do it.
You don't need to be a black political leader to stand up right now.
No, I agree.
You need to be a human.
Well, but I'm specifically calling out black Republicans to stand up as a collective, not individuals, to say we're calling on this party to speak up. And also, look, I'm a Christian. My wife was a pastor. Where are the white evangelicals? Why are they so silent?
Now that is critical. Where are the white evangelicals? You know, we're having 1,000 ministers march to show white and black ministers at Martin Luther King's statue. And is the president going to call the mother of this victim, this woman that was killed? Why hasn't the president picked up the phone and called this family and said, on behalf of all Americans, we mourn with you because your daughter died standing up for what was right?
All right, well, doing the right thing, you don't have to be Christian. It doesn't matter what your race is. We all should come together, respect one another, and do the right thing. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
For this important conversation.